Mace Windu could have beaten General Grievous, and twice he did. Then he stopped. He never went after the general a third time, and the reason has been retold so often that the retelling replaced the record. The general kept a lightsaber from every Jedi he defeated. Windu's blade never hung on that belt. Coruscant was burning. In the final year of the conflict, Separatist forces broke through the planetary shield and brought the fighting down into the capital itself, and the engagement that followed became known as the Battle of Coruscant. Somewhere inside it, on the roof of a maglev train running fast between the towers, Mace Windu stood alone against the commander of the entire Separatist military. General Grievous had not risen through any chain of command. He was built. His body carried 4 arms where 2 had been, and from his belt hung the lightsabers of Jedi he had already defeated, taken one at a time, and kept. Few Jedi had ever fought something that could not be felt through the Force. What he carried instead was a set of processors wired into what remained of his living brain. Those processors did not watch a fight the way a person watches a fight. They measured it. The Corran Master came at him with forbade, the lightsaber form he had built himself. His purple blade opened up across the roof of the car. The general's circuitry took it apart. In the Legends novel Labyrinth of Evil, the machinery adjusts him while the fight is still running, shifting his stance and his posture, correcting the angles of his parries, his riposte, and his thrusts. He was doing it on a moving train, at speed, against the man who had invented the form. Then it ended. Windu dropped low and cut through the roof of the car beneath the general's advance, and when one claw lost its magnetic grip, he threw Grievous off the side with the Force. The account leaves his fate there, unresolved, as the train ran on without him. He did not follow. At the same time, another Jedi was tearing through the general's elite droids, and he was not struggling at all. Kit Fisto met 2 Magna Guards during the same engagement. These were not ordinary droids. Grievous had them made as an answer to the Jedi, armed with electrostaffs of frick, an alloy that turned a lightsaber blade aside. He had trained them himself in the classic forms of blade combat. Fisto took both apart. He was a gifted swordsman, though far from the Order's strongest, and against the General's sharpest work, he did not need to be. Back on the roof of the train, what the General produced was not forbade, but it was close enough. Close enough is not the same as equal, and the account never reaches further than that. It shows a man with no interest in stretching the contest out any longer than it had to run, on a burning planet with a kidnapped Chancellor somewhere above him. The train was not their first encounter. Months earlier, the two had already met in battle on the graveyard world of Boz Pity in the Legends comic Obsession. Grievous struck down Master Soon Bates before the man could raise his blade, and took the lightsaber for his belt. Windu did not hesitate. He tore a Separatist Stap, a one-man repulsor craft, off the ground with the Force and dropped it on the general before he registered it. Grievous was hurt badly enough that Dooku had the Magna Guards carry him out of the battle. Windu was not the last Jedi who would have to face that machinery. Later in the Legends novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Windu explains it to Obi-Wan Kenobi. The general's processors could answer a lightsaber form, in kind, after a single exchange. He said it to a man he was sending into the same fight and expecting to see come back. Windu never went after him again. That much is true. The retellings add a motive and a master too shaken to face the general a third time, but it appears nowhere in the record. What it does show is something simpler: 2 fights, 2 wins, and a master who had another threat to pursue. 3 years before that train, 7 Jedi were pinned inside a downed ship on Hypori, waiting to find out what the general actually was. Ki-Adi-Mundi was among them, and so was Shaak-Ti, 7 of the Order's best, and not one of them had faced the thing outside. If you want more videos like this one, a quick subscribe means you will always be first to know. The Republic had no file on it, and no name for what had been built to hunt them. In the Legends microseries Star Wars Clone Wars, Grievous goes through them. 3 of the 7 were lost, and the survivors lived only because a squad of ARC troopers reached the wreck and forced him to withdraw. Ki-Adi-Mundi emerged from the fighting with a scar down his skull that he carried for the rest of the war. They had trained their entire lives to sense an attack before it came, but there was no warning of any kind. Every instinct the Order had refined across generations assumed an opponent who was alive in the Force. Hypori gave the Jedi their first enemy the Force could not warn them about. The details differ between canon and Legends, but the problem Windu faced does not. In either continuity, it was never a problem of skill. The general had a rule about when he was allowed to fight at all, and Dooku had written it for him. Before any of it, Grievous was Kaiman Jai Shalal, a Kaleesh warlord whose people counted him a demigod for his victories in the Hook War. Then his shuttle came apart around him. The crash was not an accident. It was arranged with an ion bomb planted aboard by the banking clan, the Geonosians, and Dooku himself. Geonosian engineers built the body that replaced his own. The Republic never met the Kaleesh warlord. It met Dooku's creation. Dooku taught him personally. He took the Kaleesh warlord inside his new body and trained him with a lightsaber, and he handed him a rule to fight by. Grievous was to hold three things when he engaged a Jedi: fear, surprise, and intimidation. Missing any one of them, he was to leave. The whole conflict runs the same way: Grievous leaving, breaking off above Coruscant, slipping away from engagement after engagement the moment the arithmetic turned, and taking the initiative with him every time he went. Twice he ignored Dooku's rule, and both times the Jedi in front of him was Mace Windu. He stayed on Ba's pity when the doctrine told him to leave. He stayed on the train. The rule held against every Jedi in the Order except the one man it could not intimidate. He almost never fought alone, and that was the entire design. The Magna Guards travel with him, usually two of them, sometimes more. Their electrostaffs were built from frick, so a lightsaber turned aside instead of cutting. Because they kept coming after losing an arm, a leg, or a head, a Jedi who beat one had not finished anything at all. They flanked. Splitting a Jedi's attention was the whole point of them, and they were very good at it, because Grievous sparred against them himself. In Labyrinth of Evil, the Count watches one of those sessions from the bridge of his flagship. Grievous won it. Dooku named the flaws in the General's technique anyway, one after another, and understood as he did so that some of them were his own work. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Windu told the Chancellor that the General would run and hide, as he always did. He called him a coward. Every fight Grievous entered, he did so with an exit already prepared. The duel Windu is said to have refused was never offered to him. The Council had someone else in mind. Just days after the capital stopped burning, the Council met to decide who would hunt him down. Yoda wanted an experienced master. Ki-Adi-Mundi named Obi-Wan Kenobi. Windu's name did not come up. He was sitting in that room while they chose. Windu was the senior figure on the High Council after Yoda, and he had led the Order himself before the conflict began. Most of those years had kept him on Coruscant, running the Republic side of it from the Temple and the Senate rather than the field. He was not a field commander waiting for an assignment. He also had a different enemy. Somewhere in the capital, hidden inside the government, sat the Sith Lord who had engineered the entire conflict, a master of an ancient order of dark side users. Windu had been hunting him for years, with hardly any clues to identify him. This was the Sith Lord the Order needed Windu to find. A droid general was not. Kenobi was a master of Suresu, the third lightsaber form built almost entirely around defense and outlasting. A defensive form never has to guess what an opponent will do next, because it does not commit to the guess. Grievous could answer any style after one exchange. Suresu did not offer him one. Windu said as much himself. Of all living Jedi, he told Kenobi, Obi-Wan had the best chance of bringing the General down. Windu sent him off with a warning. In the novelization, he tells Kenobi the General might come at him in any style, or in all of them at once. He was handing off a fight he had already solved on paper, but there was one more voice in the Chancellor's office that week, and he wanted Grievous alive, because the man who kept the General alive was not Dooku. Sidious gave them Utapau. He told the Jedi exactly where his own Supreme Commander was hiding, and nobody had asked him. He had already instructed Grievous to move the Separatist Council to Mustafar and keep them alive. He had told Windu in those same weeks that the Senate would keep the conflict running for as long as the General lived. He pressed hard for Anakin Skywalker to be the one sent. Earlier in the conflict, in Yoda Dark Rendezvous, the Chancellor worked on Windu directly, suggesting this age might belong to Windu more than to Yoda. Windu rejected the idea that he stood above Yoda, believing he was not the ancient Grand Master's equal in peace or in war. Keeping Windu on Coruscant also kept him beside the man he had been hunting for years. Sidious needed the General breathing long enough to justify the emergency, and gone the moment the emergency had finished its work. It is not confirmed that he steered the Council's choice, and he would not have needed to. The Order's senior master was already precisely where the Chancellor wanted him, a short walk from that office. Sidious had handed the Jedi their target and their timetable. Within days, Windu would stand across from the man who wrote the war, holding the one weapon that had ever worked on him. Kenobi brought Grievous down above a sinkhole city on Utapau, and the fighting was effectively finished. What remained was the Chancellor. Within hours, in that Chancellor's office, Mace Windu finally faced the enemy he had spent years trying to find. In the Legends novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker arrived to a sight he could barely name. The blade had stopped being a blade. It had become an oblate sphere of purple fire. He had come to arrest the Sith Lord himself, and with a lightsaber in his hand, he beat him. Forbade needed something Grievous did not have. Forbade was a state of mind before it was ever a set of movements. It is a channel for darkness, opened on purpose, and its user accepts the opponent's wrath and turns it back on him. The practitioner becomes one half of a circuit. The other half is the darkness inside the opponent, and the circuit only closes when that darkness is present. Windu built the form, and he never took it further than he took it against Sidious, because no opponent he ever faced was a more complete vessel for the other side of the Force. Dooku, who had spent a lifetime inside Form 7, judged the whole thing bridled and weak without direct use of that darkness. The channel ran both ways. In the Legends novel Shatterpoint, the cost appears plain and simple. A Jedi who opened it and enjoyed what came back could follow that pleasure a long way down. And of the handful who ever practiced it, Windu was the only one who never fell. Against Sidious, the risk was worth running. But against a machine, there was no channel to open at all. No risk, and nothing on the other side worth reaching for. Windu's other gift ran on the same current. Shatterpoint let him perceive the fault lines threading through a person, an object, a moment. The single point where pressure would break the entire structure open. It was a perception the Force handed him, and it revealed the fault lines hidden within what he observed. None of this made Grievous the better swordsman. Windu still would have won. He would simply have been forced to do it with the blade alone, without the advantages that normally made him so dangerous. Forbade and Shatterpoint were both Force-dependent abilities. This suggests that two of Windu's greatest advantages offered little against the General. Grievous had taken everything from Forbade that a body untouched by the Force could take. He copied the stance, he copied the posture, the angles, the parries, the riposts, the thrusts. Every one of those things exists outside the Force, which is the only reason a machine could reproduce any of them. The General could reproduce the techniques themselves, but he could not generate the Force behind them or the connection that gave them their power. He exposed the half of it that was never the point. Grievous fought behind a doctrine and an escort that between them made a fair duel impossible, so no third fight was ever on the table. The Council needed patience for a general who ran, and its most valuable blade was already fixed to the capital and to an enemy still hidden inside the Senate. The Chancellor wanted that general breathing and that blade close, and against a body with nothing living inside it, the two gifts that made Mace Windu the most dangerous Jedi alive had nothing at all to take hold of. The Order buried Grievous but never truly understood him. For over 1,000 generations, its forms and its perceptions had assumed the same thing, an enemy who could be felt. The General was proof that Jedi assumptions could be walked around, not overcome, but simply bypassed. A warlord inside a shell of duranium, cutting down Jedi Masters who had spent their whole lives learning to sense an attack before it arrived. The Jedi that the Order needed was Obi-Wan Kenobi, a master with a defensive form with patience to wait. It worked, and it took 3 years. Then Order 66 came. The Jedi had spent a conflict learning to fight an enemy their traditions had never prepared them for. They were undone by the exact opposite, a man who stood inside the Force the entire time, near enough to touch. Not one of them had ever felt him there. Grievous took a blade from every Jedi he defeated. Windu's was never among them. A purple lightsaber was the one trophy that would have proven nothing because the General could reproduce its movements and never once touch what moved it. There is a version of this story in which the second best blade in the Order looked at a machine and lost his nerve. That version survived, and the record never supported it. Windu never explains himself to the Council or to anyone. Every Jedi who faced General Grievous wanted to know how to beat him. Windu already understood what defeating him would require. Grievous never chose his own war. The man who kept the General breathing, who handed the Jedi their timetable and sat in the capital the whole time, did not create the plan alone. Before Sidious ever moved a general across a war, Darth Plagueis taught him how to bend death itself. and what that master did with the secret rewrote the whole history of the Sith. So watch this video to find out.